This is Fatherly Tales podcast, which is where men and fathers can learn to have like a better emotional awareness and to grow and become preferably better fathers and men as they move on through life. Today I have somebody I met in person and someone I'm very excited actually to talk to because if you ever get a chance of being near Terry, you'll know he kind of has a feeling to him, and it's and I meet a lot of people when I travel around the world, and Terry's kind of one of those ones that kind of had a special sort of he just kind of left a seed in my mind that I always kind of wanted to work with something with. So Terry Bullman is a father. He is an entrepreneur and is a retreat leader based in Costa Rica. He owns, or co-owns actually, Casa Kismet, which is a boutique retreat center in Nosara, where he leads men's and co-ed experiences focused on growth, discipline, and connection. So he has a background in fighting and years of experience guiding breathwork. Terry helps men step into responsibility, build stronger relationships, and lead with intention at home and in life. His work centers around the idea that fatherhood isn't just a role, it's like a daily practice of presence, strength, and self-awareness. And he's got quite a resume. I know you're a professional fighter at one point in your life, and you have a TV show that was on the History Channel, which I believe was The Human Weapon. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So Terry, I guess to kind of start with, maybe just a little bit of your background about how you moved from fighting into leading men's retreats. Like, I'm sure there's many steps inside there, but this is what really sort of triggered it with me. There's when I met you, there's kind of a calm presence, but I know there's a lot of deep sort of understanding and wisdom underneath that, and I think that's what people really feel in you when they go to your retreats. And so that's kind of what I would like to sort of touch on, I guess. So from your opinion, what sort of got you into fighting, I guess, and a little bit about your career there and how that transition has moved into what you do now with men's retreats.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was always intrigued by, martial arts, and I would watch, in my childhood, it was Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee and, Van Damme and all those guys, and I was just super intrigued. And believe it or not, I was the smallest kid in school my whole life. I was one of the smallest kids. So I didn't play any sports. My parents, because of my size, were afraid to put me into martial arts or anything else. So as soon as I was able, I was 18, I joined a Taekwondo studio and started, competing in martial arts and fell in love with it. I decided, I wanted to box. I started doing these tough man, brawl things they would have at the Civic Center. Did a bunch of those and did well, and then ended up moving to Knoxville, Tennessee when I was in my mid-20s, to work with a coach at East Miller there. Started my career as a pro boxer, but I ended up having a son at 22, which made it really hard to be full-time fighter, dad, all those things. So was going back and forth between Knoxville, Tennessee, and Asheville or Weaverville, North Carolina, where I'm from. Um, Ended up fighting as a pro boxer, and then fought for the World Combat League, which was the Chuck Norris League, for a couple of seasons. Did some MMA, and then been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the last 15 years or so. Competing, I haven't competed in probably 4 or 5 years. I think I'm a little long in the tooth for that sort of thing. But just, that was my whole life, was teaching other people how to defend themselves, teaching fighting. I loved combat sports. I still do. I still train. It's part of our retreat. But for the retreat, it's more about what comes up for the man than them being a cage fighter or, kickboxer. And then I came to Nosada in 2016, with some friends that wanted to surf, and I'm not a surfer, so but I really liked the town. And then they wanted to come back the next year, and I was training for a jiu-jitsu competition. So I Told him I could come, but I needed to find a place to train while I was here, and I found a place called Jungle's Edge where they were doing jujitsu. I had a competition that was like 2 weeks out, so I wanted to train while I was here. Met the owner, and he said he found out I had gyms in Tennessee, and he said, "Have you ever thought about doing retreats?"
Hmm.
I was like, "No, but it seems like a cool way to get a free vacation." So I started doing retreats, um, and then my wife and I bought Casas Kisman in um, November of 2019. Not sure if you heard about the global pandemic, but it was pretty bad, and we had to leave for 8 months. We were shut out, and we just sold everything and decided to move here. And then, I actually joined a men's circle. I'd never
Hmm.
done anything like that. I mean, definitely in the fighting world, that's not something that you do. We and I saw this need for men to come together and be able to be vulnerable and share, and it seemed like most of the things out there were either Navy SEAL, put you through the muck for a weekend, or very what's the word? Opposite of that, you know, very, not very masculine, but almost trying to break a man's masculinity in a way. And I
Hmm.
thought there needs to be some sort of balance, and that's where the balanced man came from.
Yeah. So people who are listening, so that Terry's retreat is called the Balanced Man. I've been watching online actually. I think the last one you just did, you shared a lot more on your stories and stuff, and it was really it's a really beautiful thing to see actually from a distance, and it's all I can tell it's all different men that are there as well, from younger ages to more mature, and I'm sure
Mhm.
there's married people in there, people with kids, people without, and many different elements. But what I can really see is and it's almost palpable actually, there's an openness within the group, and I think that can be a challenging thing for men's groups that I've been to. Sometimes it takes a long time for men sometimes to open up, but I feel from what I watch is that within your group it seems to happen a lot faster, and I
Yeah.
don't know the reason for that, but that's what I've sort of witnessed from a distance, I guess.
Yeah, I think the reason is the physical side. I mean, these guys are, day one, they come in on Saturday. We have dinner Saturday night, opening circle. Then the next morning, we do basically a pool assessment because we're going to do an open water swim on Monday. And then after the pool, they're introduced to boxing. So immediately these guys have met the night before, and now we're gonna all try to punch each other in the face. It's not an ego thing. It's not a who's better thing. Again, it's more about what comes up for each individual man. Some men, maybe don't have any experience with, they've never punched at someone or been punched at, or it can be uncomfortable. So, we do that for an hour, hour and a half. So again, it's not like we're trying to make these guys fighters. It's more about how they show up. Can they meet the other man where he is? Can they um, let their ego go? And if the other guy's going too hard, say, "Hey, man, can you lighten up a little bit?" That's hard for
Mm-hmm.
guys to do. If you know, if you maybe are a little bit better than the other guy, are you, hammering him? So it's very controlled. Most of the time, any kind of sparring and that, they're doing it with me. So it's a lot more controlled, and, not to say I'm
Mm-hmm.
the best fighter in the world, but usually I have a lot more experience than anyone coming
Mm-hmm.
in, so I'm able to kind of push them without hurting them, and hopefully in the meantime not getting myself hurt.
Nice.
But
Yeah,
usually with that goal, they're dropped in day one, day two, they're like bonded.
yeah, it's super interesting that you bring that up. Like, I just started sort of doing boxing training about it's close to 3 years ago now, and Krav Maga, which actually I heard from you, funnily enough, and that was one of my hardest parts was punching someone. Actually, I
Mhm.
was I was more okay with being punched, funnily enough, but definitely I was having a bit of a struggle with punching people. It brings up all sorts of different emotions and stuff, and it was I never thought I would, but it's actually also very bonding.
Yes, it is. And I think we've been doing it as men. We've been doing it for forever. But if you can take the kind of the competition piece out, martial arts and fighting got a lot more fun for me, especially in the last. I mean, I just turned 52. I'm probably not gonna win any kind of, cage fighting championships anymore. So for me, it can't be about winning. It's about learning. It's about getting better. It's about helping my partner get better. So for me, I think it's something that boys should be able to do from an early age. I think it would help them with, if they do want to do other sports, and just in life in general.
Yeah. So do you feel that your background in what you went through has kind of helped with sort of emotional and sort of leadership challenges within fatherhood and sort of guiding men now? Do you think that's a core element of where you're at?
Yeah, I think so, especially, in the more Eastern martial arts. I mean, the philosophies, when I had a martial arts studio for 15 years, and just having, you know, especially young boys, even ages 4, 5, 6 years old, having them learn the importance of, eye contact when someone's talking, the mental benefits like focus and discipline and respect and teamwork and, all those things. But then the self-discipline piece as well. And a lot of people think about discipline as this bad thing, this hard thing, but there's freedom in discipline.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually, if you're able to be disciplined to a degree, it frees up a lot of things in your life, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Uh, so I think those mental benefits, as soon as you can instill them in a young boy, especially, the better.
Amazing. And so sort of to think about what you've just, I know you've just had a bunch of guys there this week. I'd say, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges you see that men face with regards to kind of like stepping into their roles as fathers and leaders?
I mean, I think honestly it is. It's taking the lead. I feel like a lot of men are afraid to take the lead these
Mm,
days, right? Because we're, and it has nothing to do with equality or, I personally believe that the man is the head of the household. Um, that's how I was raised. That's my belief. And head of the household doesn't mean better than, greater than, more powerful than your spouse, but somebody has to lead.
mm-hmm,
And, for men, I think they're, I see a lot of men, it seems, on the retreats, where they haven't taken the lead. Their wife or partner is, insecure, scared, worried. So they start doing little things to, you know, and that means maybe going into the workforce. They become the breadwinner, they become, self-sufficient, and then the man's kind of left with this feeling of, I don't know what to do. And the
mm,
women are saying, I love my husband, and I don't care to work or whatever, but I just want him to be passionate about something, have purpose, and like work hard towards that purpose.
mm,
And I think a lot of men are either so afraid of failure, um, or they're just feel emasculated because they're not the breadwinner or they're not the one leading the household. And then usually that's where the numbing starts with alcohol, drugs, affairs, all those
mm-hmm.
things. So it's just a loop.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I mean I've probably fallen into that myself at times as well, and I see it. I do see that often as well. So when I'm looking around, and it's interesting because you're around it so often that you're obviously seeing it a lot more. So then I have an element, I guess, which is probably about vulnerability, which I think is something that really probably comes up in your retreats as well. So what role do you feel like vulnerability plays in your retreats, especially when for men who might be used to like hiding emotions, or they're struggling with communication, or maybe they're trying to feel strong by kind of being stoic or whatever it is, like what's your sort of your take on that when you witness kind of firsthand with men?
Yeah, I think the part of that that's created at the retreat is the container. We start with, hey, what happens here stays here. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Nothing shared outside of the container. You're safe. We just bled with each other or whatever on the floor. We did the hike together. Guys are tired, and when they get tired, they get a little more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way that we hold space for each other. When a man shares, we do the whole "I see you, I hear you." There's
Mm-hmm.
not a there's not a we're not trying to fix. I'm not going to try to give you advice. I'm not going to try to you know solve the problem. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to listen, because most of us know the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
We already know the answer. But being able to share in a space where you're not afraid to feel judged or condemned, or you're going to get made fun of. I
Mm-hmm.
have men who have sat and told me, I'm not doing the circle thing, I'm not going to sit and look in another man's eyes, all this stuff is prudy. And then they're the first ones to break down into tears because they're just holding everything in. And
Mm-hmm.
usually men, if you're just sitting in a circle talking, guys can hide. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, on the mats, in the open water, on the hike, the real man shows up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's very hard to hide in those moments. And then when we do get back to the circle, I feel like guys are just a lot more open and willing to share. Um, it's made a big difference for me, because they don't feel like they have to hide. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of men are afraid to be open and vulnerable and honest because, um, it's backfired on them. And there are things that men can share with other men that they can't share with their partner. I mean, I know my wife, and I know if I come home and I'm worried about the finances, and then I share that with her, she's not going to be able to hold it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not her job to hold it. All
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to happen is I'm going to tell her, and then she's going to be stressed out and worried. And now I have the problem of the finances and trying to get her back to zero. So obviously, we men need to be able to share with other men and feel
Yeah,
safe and be able to contain his feelings.
I think that's huge. That I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not there to see everything that goes on, but that may well be one of the biggest things from the retreats. From just, I mean, I'm quite easy at sharing stuff, but I know for a lot of men, it's not. Especially in England, actually, it's pretty prevalent that people are kind of stiff upper lip and they don't share a lot. And so you can kind of see it in them as well. It boils up and it can come out, like you say, in all different ways, whether that's addictions or you know an attitude that maybe is not conducive to kind of being friendly to other people or whatever it may be. And but it's difficult to help them. It's almost like you do need to create a space so they can help themselves, because it's a lot of men, from my experience, they don't necessarily like being told what to do, but when they're in their own space and they make their own choice, it seems to be far more impactful for them, and obviously they feel safe in that moment as well, which you've kind of brought up as well. So now I know that you have children, I know, and so I don't really want you to talk about other people who've been through retreats because I think that's just kind of a sacred space. But if you're able to for yourself, is there something maybe that you've learned from your retreats that's kind of deeply impacted you with your relationship with your children, something that's kind of very positive that's kind of come out of that you've sort of um, learned through these experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I have a 29-year-old son who has a daughter on the way, so I'm going to be a
Hmm.
grandfather in September.
Wow.
Um, and then I have a 22-year-old son, and we're all very close. So moving here and not being close to them has been very hard on me. There's a lot of fear, a lot of what if something happened, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just letting them be their own men,
Mm-hmm.
make their own choices, make their own decisions, supporting them, being there. Um, the retreat has helped me a lot with that
Mm.
because they're,
That's
like I said, my oldest is 29. He didn't have kids of his own. He's a businessman. He's got a family. He's his
mm,
own man. He's still my child, and I still
yeah.
love him like, man, it's my baby. But um, it was very hard to let that go because that was my role for so long. Um,
Mm.
I was their dad, and that's what I did. And again, I'm still their father, but just letting them be their own men, make their own choices, make their own mistakes, even though I can see the mistake, you know,
Mm.
a mile away and probably know what's going to happen. Just holding space for them and being there, and you know, not doing the "I told you so" when it happens.
Mm. And I think that takes, for guys, I think takes a huge amount of strength actually. To not to keep your mouth shut actually and just witness is very difficult for men to do
That's
because
the
it,
masculine. The masculine is the containment.
yeah.
you know, Being able to hold all the shit, all the energy, being able to hold it. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
hard part. And then what happens a lot of times, kind of like I said with my wife's super supportive and amazing, but there's just certain topics that I don't talk about with my wife because she can't hold it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I can't not talk to her about it and then just hold it into myself. There needs to be an outlet. And that outlet could be a group of guys that I trust. That outlet could be a jujitsu class or a boxing class or a run, somewhere to get that energy out and be able to, even if I can't talk about it, to be able to get that energy out. It's got to release.
Yeah.
And I think that happens to men a lot. So it definitely we need to be able to share, and we need to be able to get things off our chest or talk about things that are bothering us or worrying it, and not have to hold it all the
Mm-hmm.
time. We just have to make sure we're doing it in a safe space with people that can hold it, and usually that's not going to be your partner.
Mm-hmm. That's I think that's amazing advice because I think maybe you go into relationships thinking that that's the number one. Maybe that's the only person they feel safe sharing with. That might be part of it that they'd have never felt safe sharing with anyone, and now they've got someone and they think, oh, this is I'm just going to dump it all on them, and that's it's probably just too much.
Well, and the other thing that happens too, with a lot of men, and I really harp on this a lot with guys, is the you know and it comes back to the discipline piece, but the discipline is more about integrity with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be as small as, you say you're going to get up at 5 a.m. and go for a run, and then the alarm clock goes off. You don't get up for whatever reason. You want to sleep in. It's too cold. You're like, I'm not going to go run.
Mm-hmm.
And you have verbalized this to your partner, or you verbalized it to your kids, and then
Mm-hmm.
they realize and know that you didn't get up and go for the run at 5 a.m. They
Mm-hmm.
probably won't say anything. You probably will feel like it's not that big of a deal, but
Mm-hmm.
you're just slowly breaking that trust. So then what happens is, if I've done that a few times and my wife didn't say anything, but there's a little check mark of like, this guy doesn't always keep his word, or this guy doesn't have integrity with himself. So then when
Mm-hmm.
I come to her and I say, hey, I'm worried about finances or money's low, but don't worry, everything's going to be all right. She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I've
Mm-hmm.
broken that integrity piece without it's not that I've lied to her, but she's seen me lie to myself over and over and over. And it's the same with kids. They know that ah, dad doesn't always keep his word,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it feels like a lot of pressure, but like I said, if you verbalize something and you say you're going to do it, you got to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I
If you want to
100%
have
agree.
if you want to have the kind of relationship with your wife and your kids that you want, if you want to be the leader of the house, if you want when you say something for them to take it as truth, then you have to be a man of your word all the time, a hundred
Mm-hmm.
percent.
I
And
100% agree.
yeah, it seems like a small thing, but you know, if you're not sure if you're gonna go run in the morning, keep it to
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if
That's
unless you want to you know, really put yourself on the hook for it, don't verbalize it because as soon as you verbalize it, in my mind, it has to come true.
huh, that's a I think challenging for a lot of men to do, but I think to build that skill though is highly, highly useful. And I say a lot with I see with children with my own daughter, she doesn't usually do what I say, she does what I do. So if I say you don't do this and then I'm doing it, she doesn't generally say much, but I can tell I can look at her behavior later and she usually is kind of copying what I do. So it's in that regards, I love having children because it's like a permanent tally on yourself that you can something that you can that kind of gives you direct feedback of where you're sort of not being true to yourself. Really, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think if you build that trust with your spouse, especially where she knows that like, hey, yeah, it's a little tight right now, but don't worry, I got it. We're gonna be okay. You know, she's not gonna be able to hold it unless she believes you. And
mm-hmm,
she's not gonna believe you unless you're a man of your word. And you're
mm-hmm,
not a man of your word if you break integrity with yourself every day.
mm-hmm. That's yeah, so true. I think it's something I'll take on for myself as well. So thank you for sharing that. Um, from a very sort of practical standpoint, because I know I believe a lot of what you do is well, maybe nearly all of what you do is your actually internal work. But I know that men
Mm.
are very attracted to practical things, and I think that the very physical elements of what you do is it makes it very attractive as well to bring them in. So if you could pick like two or three sort of daily sort of practical tools or habits that I mean you've just mentioned about keeping your word basically, but um, yeah, just some habits or tools they could use sort of daily, which are maybe sort of simple in themselves, that you think are very valuable as a father and or a partner.
Yeah, the best thing I think we do is our morning practice. We're on the floor every morning at 5 a.m. And you know, it doesn't matter. Like for you, it doesn't have to be 5 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
But it needs to be a space and time when you can do it without interruptions anywhere in the world. Just taking time for yourself. You know, and my
Mm-hmm.
whole morning practice is 15 minutes. But
Huh.
I get up every single morning, you know, before the phone, before the emails. I go down to, you know, the yoga floor, the jiu-jitsu floor, and I stretch. I stretch for, you know, I do a set stretch routine. That's been a lot easier for me than trying to go to a yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more consistent. I can do it anywhere, anytime. But I do a certain stretch routine. Then I sit and do my gratitude practice where I just run through all the things that I'm thankful for. It can be prayer. That's my kind of my form of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I do a little short breath work um, before I drop into that prayer,
Mm-hmm.
and I do it every single day,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what.
Amazing.
That is one thing that sets the discipline piece. It's one thing that's gonna get you ready for the day, you know, just and making you feel better, how you respond to things that are gonna come up in your day. and just a mindset thing. For me, when I say all the things that I have to be grateful for, it's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to feel sorry for myself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just a setting that daily practice where we call it owning the morning. That's something that you can control. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of times we can't control traffic or, we woke up late to our alarm, whatever it is, we can't control it. Kids screaming
Mm-hmm.
in the mornings or you've disappointed your wife somehow. A lot of times we don't have a lot of control on those things, but
Mm-hmm.
one thing you can control in the morning is your morning practice.
Yeah.
Setting aside time for yourself first thing in the morning before the rest of the day gets started. I think this, for lack of a better term, kills a lot of birds with one stone. I mean, you're doing the discipline piece, you're setting yourself up, for the win for the day. You're doing your gratitudes, you're being grateful. It's going to check a lot of boxes, and you're going to do it first thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I have one that starts at 6:30, so it's like 6:30, and it ends up being till about 7:30. I find for me, and I actually I look people like I work around and stuff sometimes, and I know they don't do anything like that, and I almost kind of revere them because I don't know how they get through life without it. To be honest, like I generally just kind of have to have that every morning, and then my day goes a lot better. But I see guys that are getting through life and they don't do any of that stuff, and I kind of wonder how they kind of manage. To be honest, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing. But it's been a massive help for me for sure.
yeah, me as well.
Um, so I guess something else that probably comes up that you see as well is that I mean, all of us. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are in your kind of journey of life. Is that you're always going to have patterns and stuff that maybe are not the most helpful. And I'm guessing that's something that you possibly see in men that they may be stuck in a certain pattern or a way of thinking or um, is what sort of something that you help to get them through that? Do you feel that is sharing that helps them to get through sort of shifting patterns, or is it making them aware of it, or what do you feel as a for someone that's listening, how they can kind of maybe look back at themselves and see where maybe they're getting caught in patterns that maybe are not positive for themselves or maybe beneficial for the people around them.
Yeah, awareness is definitely the first piece. I mean, that's one of
Mm-hmm.
our tenets, kind of awareness, agency, community. Our first tenet is awareness. You have to get somewhere away from your current environment to really realize a lot of times that, you do have these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then trying to figure out why you have the patterns, where they're coming from. And we don't really delve that deep into trying to dig up past traumas.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can find out where that came from, acknowledge it, and then how are we going to break the pattern? What are we going to do? What action can we do every day to try to break that? And a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
it's something as simple as writing it down, journaling about it can make it,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's on paper. Then I can see it. I can go back,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in a couple of weeks and be like, oh, man, you wrote it down right here. This, and you're doing it again. This is the thing that you always do when things get hard or this happens. But when you've
Mm-hmm.
written it down and you're reading it and you're looking at it and you said, you know, um, you weren't going to do this anymore. We have another
Mm-hmm.
practice on the retreat that we call our daily manifesto. And this is more about what we want in our lives, how we want to show up in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
In the future, no matter if it's money or where we want to live or, what we want our partner to be like. Actually writing that down, but also things like I'm a man who's confident and, I drink mocktails instead of cocktails because I feel better in the morning. Whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're writing it down, and then at the end, mine says, "My name is Terry Bullman, and I always keep my promises." Something as simple as that, as cheesy as it sounds, can remind men later that they've made
Mm-hmm.
this commitment. or that they do tend to fall back into these traps. And then just the simple statement of, this
Mm,
is my name and I always keep my promises helps hold them
mm.
accountable.
So
What
where can
advice?
people find you basically? And I really cannot recommend enough. If you're going to go to a men's retreat and you've got the possibility that you can do it, I highly recommend going to see Terry. So where could they find you for your website and Instagram stuff like that?
Yeah, so the website is thebalanceman.life. Um, they can go on there and book a discovery call if they've got questions. We do these retreats 4 or 5 times a year, about every 2 or 3 months. So, and it's not just the retreat itself. We have basically, we call it a year container. I've still got guys on the retreat, or on our global calls from 2.5, 3 years ago. So we don't kick anybody out, but, it's a way for men, um, to be able to stay in it, because otherwise they come on a retreat, they eat clean, they do some cool things, they kind of get in the brotherhood, and then they go right back to real life,
Hmm.
and it's really easy to fall back into those habits.
Hmm.
So, we do a week's call with the guys. For a month after they leave, and then they get dropped into the global call, which is also weekly. It's not mandatory. We don't charge any kind of fee or anything like that, but it just gives men a place to be able to go, so they can come on that call, and we kind of drop right back into circle where we do a 3-word check-in, and men can just share where they are.
Amazing. So good. So what I will do as well is that when we come to post this, I'll put your links and stuff on there as well anyway, so it's easy for people to find you. And I do want to say thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing for guys around the world as well. I see you just growing from strength to strength actually, and I think you're definitely on the forefront of the leadership of men doing this kind of work at the moment. And so yeah, I want to say thank you for doing that.
Man, thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to jump back on anytime.
Amazing.